This conference will now be recorded.
In today's session, we'll try to continue discussing about that provider block for AWS and how to configure AWS provider using provider block. And also we'll try to discuss about a few resources, very basic resources in AWS like EC2 instance, how it works. So as I already discussed in the last session, using Terraform block, we can configure Terraform configurations, Terraform related settings like the required version, required providers for Terraform to create a resources and its versions, required provider versions. And we discussed about version constraint also. How to define the constraint, required constraint for the Terraform version as well as the provider, required provider version constraints also, how it works, we discussed in yesterday session. So we discussed about what is the pessimistic operator, what does it mean if we give like this, right? And what is equals, what is greater than equals, like that we discussed. Now let's understand. I defined required provider as AWS because I want to create few resources using AWS, let's say. So we configure Terraform to use a AWS provider. Now we need to configure the AWS provider, like what region, in what region you want to manage your resources. Under this provider block, you can define the region. What region? If you see the Terraform registry, they are giving a documentation. They have given a documentation also how to use that provider. So let me go to this AWS provider. You can see if you click on this use provider option, they are going to show you like this. But here you need to configure the provider related settings. So what we can define in this provider block for AWS, we can see here in the documentation. So just to give an example, they have given sample like this region, like a region. Not only just region, you can define various other configurations also, not only just region. As I already told, if you guys are using Terraform 0.13 and later, you can define this Terraform block, provider block like this. But Terraform 0.12 and earlier version, only provider block. There was no Terraform block. So if you guys are using Terraform old version, like 0.12 or earlier, we used to define provider block only. There is no Terraform block. Now, before we use this AWS provider, configuration for that AWS provider, authentication and configuration, right? So Terraform is going to use AWS provider for creating and managing AWS resources, but the Terraform provider, AWS provider has to authenticate. The Terraform AWS provider has to authenticate for creating or updating or deleting AWS resources. So there are various ways. We can authenticate Terraform with AWS. Terraform can authenticate with AWS using various ways, several ways. As of now, I just defined provider block. I just mentioned the region, and I have defined the resource block. To create a AWS instance. These are like a argument name for this resource type, and argument value or expression, we can call it here, argument value or argument expression, we can say. So these are like arguments, argument names, or argument values and or expressions we can define here in the body. And I wanted to create a resource of type AWS instance using these arguments using AWS provider. But as of now, we have not authenticated AWS. We have not authenticated AWS. So Terraform will not able to create or update or delete any Terraform resources. Let me run this. Let me run this from command prompt. You can open a terminal in Visual Studio Code also. You can open a terminal in Visual Studio Code also, but the terminal is very small. The terminal is very small. That's why I'm opening a command prompt directly in that folder from the system itself, because this terminal looks very small. So instead of running the commands from this inbuilt terminal, integrated terminal here, let me open a command prompt in my Mac. Let me go to that folder. I'll run there. So I'll go to the folder. I'll go to the folder where I have my Terraform configurations. My Terraform configurations are in this folder. I'll go to this folder. This folder. So that is in my desktop. That is in my desktop. Under desktop, I have Terraform lab. Under Terraform lab, again, this is where I have a Terraform configuration. I'll open a command prompt here. I'll open a command from this folder where I have a Terraform configuration file. So we already executed Terraform init to initialize the required backends and required plugins. We already done this yesterday. Now let me try to execute Terraform plan. Let me try to execute Terraform plan to understand the execution plan. Now let's say Terraform plan I am running. Terraform plan I am running. If you see, it is going to compare the Terraform configurations with the current state. But as of now, there is no resources created. As of now, there is no resources created. So it is trying to compare the current Terraform configurations, that is desired state with actual resources. But before that itself, it is saying, read this message. What it is trying to say? What this is trying to say? It is trying to say no credentials found for AWS provider, because Terraform is using AWS provider to talk to the AWS to manage or create the resources. But as of now, did we configure or are we passing any AWS credentials to the Terraform, the provider, to create or manage the resources? Are we passing any credentials to the Terraform AWS credentials so that Terraform can contact AWS using that provider? So we are not passing any credentials to the Terraform so that to authenticate with AWS. There are various ways. There are various ways we can pass, right? So they are also giving a documentation. Please see this for more information about providing credentials. They're saying, please see this link, same link, whatever I am using here. They're saying, please check this link, documentation. So if you see authenticating, so there are various ways we can authenticate with the AWS by Terraform. One is parameters in the provider configuration. Another way is environment variables. One more way is a shared credential file, and another way is a shared configuration files. Like that, there are various ways you can authenticate AWS with the Terraform so that Terraform can create. Let's understand the first option. First option in the provider section. In the provider section, credentials can be provided. Credentials can be provided by adding an access key and secret key in the provider section like this. As of now, we just defined region. Are we passing this access key and secret key in this provider section? Are we configuring required access key and secret key here in the provider section? As of now, no. So this is one way. This is first option. You can use access key and secret key like that. As of now, let me create one IAM user. Let me create one IAM user. Let me create one IAM user with admin access. With admin access, I am going to create. I am going to use that user access key and secret key for working with the Terraform. For working with Terraform itself, I am going to create one IAM user, and I am going to grant an admin access to that IAM user. We will use those access key and secret key in a Terraform configuration so that Terraform can talk to the AWS using that access key and secret key. And since we are giving admin access to that user, it can create or update or terminate any AWS resource. Are you guys clear what I am trying to say? First, I will create one IAM user in AWS, and I will use that user access key and secret key in Terraform configurations so that Terraform can communicate with AWS APIs using that provider to create or manage the resources. Is everyone clear on that point? So let me go to IAM. Let me go to IAM. First, let me go to IAM. I'll create one IAM user. I'll create one IAM user. I'm going to give admin access. I'm going to give admin access to that IAM user. Without admin access, if I give normal access, again, if I am trying to create some resources using Terraform, if that IAM user doesn't have permissions to that resources, again, is your Terraform script will work. Suppose if I just attach normal user, read only permissions to that user. If I create normal permissions for that user, is that access key and secret key, whatever we am going to use with Terraform, will it able to create resources, AWS resources like AWS S2, S3 bucket or EFS, EKS like that, if they don't have access? No. So that's why I'm going to create one IAM user. I'm going to create one IAM user, and I'm going to give admin permissions. This can be any other user. Suppose Balaji user has a access key and secret key with admin rights. Can I use Balaji user access key and secret key also if required? Yes. That can be any user. For now, let me create a separate user. I'm giving username Terraform. 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 I don't want to give this user. I don't want to give this user console access. If required, you can give, but I don't want to give a console access for this user. The username itself is Terraform. It can be anything. I'm just giving username as Terraform, right? Click on next. Click on next, and I will attach policies directly. I'll attach policies directly. What policies I'll attach? I'll attach administrator access. I'll attach this administrator access. Administrator access. I am attaching these policies directly to the Terraform user administrator access. Click on next. Let create a user. Create a user. Now there is a user called Terraform. There is a user called Terraform, and I have attached administrator access. Now for this user, I'll generate the access key and secret key. So I'll go to users. I'll go to this user, Terraform user. I'll go to secure. I'll make sure there is admin access for that user. I'll go to security credentials here in that IAM user. In that user section, in this IAM user, I'll go to security credentials. Here, I'll create an access key for this IAM user. So you can select use case as a command line interface, or you can select use case as other also, whatever. You can select use case as command line interface or maybe other also. Let me click on next, create a access key, and I'll download this access key, secret key for future reference. Let me keep a note of this access key. Let me keep a note of this access key. Let me keep a note of the secret key. For future reference, you can download this CSV file and you can keep it. You can keep it in your system. Now, this is my access key. This is my access key. This is my secret key. This I can define in the providers block. This I can define in the providers block as required in the documentation they have given, right? First option. There are various options. I'm just explaining the first option. Parameters in the provider configuration, something like this. Access key, secret key. Let me provide that access key in the provider block, access key, whatever access key for that IAM user. For that IAM user where you have given admin access, this is the access key. I kept a note of here. If required, you can use like this. And there is something called secret key. And secret key, whatever. I kept a note of here, or I have downloaded a CSV file locally also to use for future reference. You can check from here also that CSV file. Let me give the secret key. Now, this is the first option. This is the first option which you can use like that. Now let me execute Terraform plan. Since I have provided the access key and secret key details in the provider configurations, is that the provider is able to talk to the AWS using those credentials, using that access key and secret key now. Using this access key and secret key, is that provider, AWS provider, is able to talk to the AWS now? Yes. And when I say Terraform plan, it is saying one resource to add. How come it is saying one resource to add? Because do I have a resource block here? Do I have a resource block where I have defined I want to create a resource of type AWS instance using these arguments? Yes. Now you can see it is saying when I say Terraform plan, so it is comparing the current configurations with the previous state. In the real infrastructure, as of now, there is no EC2 instance created as for that configuration. So it is saying Terraform will perform the following action. This instance will be created like that, it is saying. And AMI I have provided, using this AMI, it is going to create a instance. And if you see availability zone, it is saying it will known after apply only. And instance type, since I have given instance type, it is saying okay, t2.micro, and it is saying the key name, private IP, public IP, all these things, it is saying known after apply. It is saying one resource to add, one to add, zero to destroy, zero to change, like that. This is the execution plan. This is the execution plan. As of now, there is no state, Terraform state file. So it is saying this resource has to be created like that. And I have given only mandatory arguments for this AWS instance. As of now, I have given only mandatory arguments for this AWS instance. If you see, this is the provider I am using, AWS provider. Here, if you go to here, AWS provider, if you go to EC2, EC2, if you go to EC2 section, EC2 section, the resource, what type of resource I am creating? This AWS instance, and they have given what arguments you can use, like that. Argument reference for, argument reference for, argument reference for that AWS instance. AMI, don't finalize, don't conclude that since it is given as optional, don't consider that this is optional. So this is optional when this is defined. Launch template is defined. Otherwise, this launch template is not defined. This is required, which means either AMI is required. If AMI is not there, at least this is required. This is required. That is what the meaning of argument reference here they are saying. Don't consider, since it is optional, you may think it is optional. It is not like that. Optional, required unless launch template is specified. Read this message. Required unless launch template is specified. That's why they are saying optional. Required unless a launch template is specified, which means if the launch template is specified, then this is optional. If the launch template is not specified, is it required? Is this AMI is required? Is the AMI is mandatory? Yes. So when I'm creating AWS EC2 instance, I'm saying AMI. And AMI is also region specific, guys. AMI is also region specific. You need to give AMI ID based on the region which you guys are creating. Suppose in provider block, what is the region I configured? The provider I configured with what region, if you see? AP South 1. Now, the EC2 instance will be created in AP South 1, that is Mumbai. But you whatever AMI you are using, that should be that AMI ID should be valid for that region. If I go to AMI catalog, I have taken this AMI only, Red Hat AMI ID, this one. So using this AMI ID, create a AWS instance with this instance type. Only these two I have provided. Only these two I have provided. AMI I have provided, but I have not specified availability zone. I have not specified various other components. There are various other components. Most of the things are applied after. Most of the things will come to know after applying. This instance type. Instance type, again they are saying optional, but when if there is a launch template, this instance type is optional, but there is no launch template, then instance type is mandatory. So only these two we are specifying. Only these two we are specifying, right? And most of the things I'm leaving it empty. So that's why when I say Terraform plan, is it saying all these things will come to know after apply only? When I'm saying Terraform plan, Terraform is saying this has to be created using this AMI with this instance type, but rest of the things it is saying known after apply, like that. And it is saying one resource to add. Now when I say Terraform apply, is that instance, is that AWS instance, is this AWS instance will be created using these arguments and its values, and most of the other things are optional. So we have not given subnet ID. We have not given subnet ID under which subnet it has to be created. So what subnet it is going to use? Some default VPC default subnet. In the default VPC, one of the default subnet it is going to create. Now let me apply this. Terraform apply. Before applying, let me go to AWS side. Let me go to EC2 section. I just created few servers. These are created manually, guys. These are created manually, not using Terraform. These are created manually. I have only 3 servers. Now if I say Terraform apply, let me run this. Terraform apply. It is going to ask, do you want to perform this action? One resource to be added. Do you want to perform this action? I can say yes. The moment I say yes, now is Terraform is contacting that AWS with the help of that provider. Is that provider is creating a AWS resources by invoking APIs internally using that Terraform configurations resource block? Yes. Now if you see, it is saying creating, still creating, like that it is coming. Now if I say, now it is said apply completed. resource 1 added. Now if I come to this folder, if I refresh, is it generated one state file now? Terraform.tf state file. Is it a tracking whatever resources? The Terraform state file will be created and updated by Terraform only. Do you see now? Is it recording that resource, whatever resource has been created, and it's all the details also, which AMI, what ARN, and all the details, like all the details it has captured. All the details it has captured. Now if I go to AWS also, let me refresh. Can I see this AWS instance? Can I see this AWS instance getting initialized? Now, who created this AWS instance? Did I manually created this AWS instance? Did I manually created this AWS instance? No. This is created. This is created by whom? Terraform. Terraform. Now, without modifying your Terraform configurations, if I again say Terraform apply, is it going to update any resource, any arguments? Without modifying Terraform configurations, without modifying your desired state, if I run Terraform apply one more time, what it is saying is Terraform plan or apply, whatever you run, what it is saying, let's see what it is saying. Terraform apply. If I execute Terraform apply, since the desired state, and current state is matching, what it is saying, no changes, no changes. Your infrastructure matches the configuration. Your current state, your current infrastructure, your current state is matched with the configuration, the desired state. So Terraform has compared your real infrastructure. Terraform has compared your real infrastructure against your configuration and found no differences. So internally Terraform is using what? What file internally Terraform is using to compare the real infrastructure, that is the current state, with your configuration, that is desired state. So the real infrastructure is actually stored in the state file. In the state file, Terraform is comparing the current state, the real state, the current state, with your desired state, that is your required desired state, that is your configurations, and it is saying no differences. So 0 to add, 0 to destroy, 0 to change it, like that. Now let's say I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to add some additional attributes. Let's say I'm going to add a tags. I'm going to add a tags. Tag key is name, value is let's say demo server, like that. Demo server, like that I'm giving. Now this is, I modified the configuration, which means I have modified the desired state, but in the current state, is this details are there. If you see the state file, it is not having that tags information, right? And your servers also doesn't have a tag. Guys, don't modify anything. Don't modify anything in the state file. Don't touch the state file. So if I say Terraform plan now, we will come to know what action it is going to do. Let's say Terraform plan. I am again saying Terraform plan, like that. Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Now let's understand what it is going to change. Is it showing the difference also? When I say Terraform plan, in the current state there is no tags. In the current state there is no tags. Now is it saying it can update in place? It can update in place, which means is that instance will be destroyed and recreated now. If you see update in place, in the sense, is it your EC2 instance will be deleted and recreated to add the tags, like that? Now, no, it is not going to delete. It is not going to delete your EC2 instance to add the tags. It is saying update in place. So Terraform will perform the following action. Terraform will perform the following action. So this will be updated. This will be updated in place. This AWS EC2 instance will be updated to add these tags. So that's why what it is saying, the plan, what it is saying? Zero to add, one to change, zero to destroy. Only one change. Now, if I really want to make the changes, can I say Terraform apply? Terraform apply. If I really want to make the changes now, I can run the Terraform apply. Terraform apply. But if you don't want a manual intervention like yes or no, there is one option called hyphen auto approve. Hyphen auto approve. There is one option here. Hyphen auto approve. If I use this option, it is not going to give that prompt whether you want to make changes or not. I am saying hyphen auto approve. So it will not give that yes or no last time whatever it was asking. Is everyone clear what is this option again? Suppose instead of manually you are running Terraform, you are running via some scripts, some pipelines. You don't want any manual intervention. Can we use this option? Hyphen auto approve option without depending on the user feedback, user input. Can we use this hyphen auto approve option? If you don't want any manual intervention to give yes, no like that, yes. So let me use this hyphen auto approve like that. Now, if you see in the real infrastructure, the tags will be added here. The tags will be added here. The tags will be added here. I am saying apply complete. One resource changed. Now let me refresh here. Do you see the tags? Do you see the tags here for that instance? You can see go to the tags. Go to the tags. Do you see the tag? Since I have given n as a small, it was not showing here. It was not showing here. But when I go to tags, can I see that a tag name is a key, value is demo server as per my Terraform configuration? Yes. But let me make again change. Let me give capital. Let me give capital. Let me again say Terraform plan. Let me again say Terraform plan. It is going to show again, it has to update it like that. It has to update it like that. It has to update like that. It is saying, it is showing the difference. Guys, you can see minus symbol and plus symbol. Minus symbol and plus symbol. What do you mean by minus? There is a change here. Earlier it is like this. Now it is like this. Now let's say Terraform apply. If required, you can say hyphen auto approve. You don't want to say yes like that. Auto approve. Now let me show that. Let me show that. Now if you see here, let me refresh. Is the tags got updated? The key is name capital N. So can you see that here as well as here also? When you go to tags, is Terraform is making the changes to your resources as per the defined configuration as per your desired state now? Something can be upgraded in place. Something can be upgraded in place. Let's say something cannot be upgraded in place. Example, suppose I'm going to modify my desired state. Let's say instead of t2.micro, if I say t2.medium, do you think it can do in place upgrade, in place update? Currently, the instance type is t2.micro. Now, when I'm saying t2.medium, will it able to perform in place update? No. So it is going to destroy. It is going to destroy that resource. Destroy in the sense it is going to delete that resource, and again it is going to create a resource. Again it is going to create a resource. Again it is going to create a resource. It is going to destroy. It is going to destroy. Remember this instance ID also you'll come to know. Remember this instance ID also you will come to know. This is the instance ID, current instance ID. Now let's say Terraform plan. Without directly making the changes, I am saying Terraform plan. Terraform plan. If you see Here it is saying instance type is t2.medium from t2.micro, like that it is saying. Now few things cannot be performed in place upgrade, but last time it was not allowed. But let's see, if the instance id is changed, which means it is going to delete, it is going to delete and recreate. Let me show Terraform apply hyphen auto approve. Terraform hyphen auto approve. Now if you see, observe this instance, observe this instance. When I am making the changes, observe this instance. What is going to happen to this instance? In the background, in the background, I have told I'm making those changes, I'm modifying those changes. Let's observe this instance. Now if you see, is that instance is getting stopped like this? Is it getting stopped like this? Guys, when we were using older version, when we are using older version of the provider, it was deleting and recreating. Latest provider version, I think they have changed. Latest provider, I think they have changed. This instance used to delete and recreate. This used to delete and it used to create a new server. But now in the recent AWS provider, if you guys remember, we used latest version of the AWS provider. We were using the latest version of the AWS provider. That's why it was not doing a force delete. It is doing a in place update. When we are using old version of the Terraform, AWS provider old version of the Terraform, it used to terminate this server altogether, create a new server like that. But there is a enhancements in the new provider version. So that's why you need to be consistent in the provider versions which you guys are using. That's why we told, right? You need to stick to some version. You need to give the constraints, conditions. If you are using constraints, is your Terraform behavior as well as your resource behaviors also will be same as you expected if you stick to that constraints like that? Yes. I hope you are able to understand why we used to use that constraints, version constraints now. Your Terraform behavior and your resource behavior also remains same if you use that resource constraint, because you are not upgrading to the latest versions, right? So that is how it works. Is everyone clear what has happened here now? Is that Terraform stopped that instance and changed the instance type now? Now if I have to destroy, this instance, what command I can execute? Guys, destroy can be done in two ways. Destroy can be done in two ways. I mean to say deletion. You can delete this resource in two ways. If I execute Terraform destroy, is all the resources created using Terraform will be destroyed? As of now, I created only one resource, but is it going to destroy that resource? If I say Terraform destroy, if I execute Terraform destroy, is it going to destroy whatever resources I have created using the Terraform configurations? Yes. This is one way. Other version, other is, suppose you remove this configuration. You remove this configuration in your Terraform script. If you remove this configuration in your Terraform script, if you say Terraform apply also, what it does, guys? Is it going to delete? If I remove the configuration in your desired state, you have removed the whole resource, you have removed in the desired state. And again, if I say Terraform apply also, let's say Terraform plan, before apply, is it saying one resource to be destroyed? Because in the desired state you don't have the resource, but the current state, do you have that resource? Desired state, in your configurations there is no resource because you have deleted that resource details, but yeah, actually there is a resource. That's why it is going to consider destroy. I hope you guys remember this point. Why yesterday, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I have explained this resource behavior, how Terraform will apply configurations. I told During this process, does the private IP change or remains same? Pawan, if you know AWS, Terraform is not doing anything. If you know AWS, when you guys change the AWS instance type, whatever it has happened, same thing happened with Terraform. Terraform is internally making API calls, nothing else. Your AWS behavior will not change. If you know AWS concept, if you know AWS concept, so if you change the instance type, whatever is going to happen, same thing happens here. So you have to be comfortable in AWS. Terraform is just a programming way, declarating way of creating or updating and deleting the resources. I already told this one. Terraform depends on something called provider. That provider is nothing but a plugins, APIs. Internally, the provider is going to make a API calls to the AWS to change the your resources as per your configurations. Okay. If you know AWS concept, you have answer for that. I don't want to get into more again AWS. I don't want to discuss. Okay. Now, as I already told in the last class, how the Terraform, how Terraform applies your resource configuration. So when Terraform creates any new infrastructure object, represented by a resource block, the identifier for the real object, is saved in the Terraform state, allowing it to be updated and destroyed in a response to future changes. Terraform is going to, save the details, the real infrastructure details in the state file, so that it will allow Terraform to be updated or destroyed that resource in a response to future changes. For example, resource block that have already have an associated infrastructure in a state file, the Terraform compares actual configuration of the object with arguments given in the configuration, and if necessary, it will update the object to match the configuration. So we already discussed Terraform, how it will apply the resource configuration. It will create a resources. That exist in the configuration, that is your Terraform code, but are not associated with a real infrastructure in the state file. Then it is going to create. It is going to destroy the resources. That exist in the state file, but no longer exist in the configuration. Is this condition, I mean to say, is this happening now in my current scenario? Is this is happening? It is going to destroy the resource that exists in the state, but no longer exist in the configuration. So in my configuration, I have deleted that resource, and it is there in the state current object. So when I say Terraform apply, is it saying I have just executed plan? Is it saying one to destroy? If you apply, it will be destroyed like that? It is saying, when I say Terraform plan, Terraform will perform the following action. This will be destroyed. Why it is going to be destroyed? Because this is not in the configuration. But it is there in the state, in the real infrastructure. This is there, but it is not there in the configuration. So if I execute Terraform apply also, is it going to destroy that resource in the real infrastructure that is in AWS? If I say Terraform apply also, is it destroying that resource? You might be thinking, if you run Terraform destroy only, it will destroy like that. But that is not correct. Suppose if there is a resource in the state, that real infrastructure, but that resource configuration is not there in your Terraform configuration file. In that case also, it is going to destroy. Is it destroying that resource now, the Terraform, when I say Terraform apply? Now if I go to AWS also, if I keep on refresh here, do you see that instance is getting shut down? Later it will be terminated. Am I doing this manually? Am I doing this manually? Did I terminated this instance manually? No. Who has done that? That is done by your Terraform only. Terraform. So if required, can I create a resource as per my configuration again? That can be t2.micro with whatever tags. Like I can give multiple tags also. Let's say I'm giving created by or managed by. Managed by. Can I say this is one key? Terraform. This is just a tag, guys. This is just a tag. Can I have n number of tags like this also if required? Yes. Now existing one destroyed, and again I have added a resource details. Again I have added a resource details. If I say Terraform plan, is it going to say one resource to be created? Because in the real infrastructure, in the real state file, you don't have that resource, but in the configuration it is there. In the configuration it is there. In the state file it don't have, but in the configuration it is there. If you see in the state file, you don't have any resources. In the state file it is don't have any resources, but in the configuration it has. In the configuration there is a resource like this, and is it going to fall under this category now? Is it going to fall under this category? Create a resource that exists in the configuration but are not associated with a real infrastructure. Then it is going to create. Sir, if I terminate instance in a console, will it be updated in state? No. Don't think all these things, because why you need to why you will terminate in the console? First of all, it is not like a school kid, right, to play different silly things here. First of all, why you are going to terminate in the console? You should not terminate. If you terminate in the console, Terraform will not come to know, right? Because you are terminating the instances. If you are updating the instances outside of Terraform, does Terraform will come to know that you have updated or terminated? If you create also, if you create or if you update, if you terminate outside of Terraform, Terraform will not come to know that what you have done. Understand that concept, guys. If you observe, even though I have three servers, in my AWS, is this information is available in state file? Is this information is available in state file? No, right? Why? Because is this created or updated or managed using Terraform? Even though I have three servers, is it there in my Terraform state? That is why you are using Terraform, Vijay Lakshmi. If you are manually updating again, why do you need to go with Terraform? Go and update manually, go and terminate manually. If you update manually via console or the other way, why you need Terraform? Terraform will not come to know, right? So if required, you can import the resources to the Terraform, which is created outside. That we will come to know later, advanced concept. How to import these resource information into your state file, will come to know. It can import the resource information into a state file, but it will not create a configuration again. You need to create that configuration. We'll come to that point later. If we require 10 instances also, you can create at a time. There is a meta arguments. There is a meta arguments. I'll come to that. There is a meta arguments for resource. I can say count. Let's say if I say count 10, with these information, with these configurations, 10 instances will be created. There is a meta argument. There is a meta argument count, but with same configurations. With same configurations, 10 instances will be created. Suppose you want different configurations, right? You can there are a lot of various ways, different configurations. You can say different AMI, different instance type. You can say something else, but these names I told, right? These names, local names should be unique. Let's say here I will say something else, something like this: T2.medium, two servers or one server with a different AMI. T2.micro, one server with a different AMI. Like this also you can define multiple resources. Let me show that. Let me show that one also. Let me go. My requirement, I want to use a different AMI. My requirement, I want to use a different AMI with a different instance type. Let's say one instance I need to create using Red Hat. Another instance I want to create using Ubuntu. Let's say Ubuntu, this one, Ubuntu AMI, Ubuntu AMI, T2.medium. I need one server. Let's say tag, I will give something. I will give something tag. And this one, T2.micro. If required, I can say two servers like this also. Now let me say Terraform plan. Let me show Terraform plan now. Is it saying three resources to add like that? Is it saying three to add? And it is giving here what needs to be added. It is saying what needs to be added also. So it is saying three to add, three resources to add. If you say Terraform plan, it is saying three resources to add. So with this one, using this AMI, with this instance type, one resource will be created. And for this one, using this AMI, using this instance type, two resources. You can see in the index also 0, 1, 0, 0 and 1 like that. It is saying two indexes. So three resources to add. Now let's say Terraform plan. It is saying three resources. Let's say Terraform apply, because this is what it is happening. It is going to create a resource that exists in the configuration but are not associated in a real infrastructure. So that's this condition are happening now. If I apply this now, it is going to create a three resources as per that Terraform configuration desired state. Let's say yes. Guys, we'll come to this. There are a lot of ways. We will come to this. What is this count, right? What do you mean by meta arguments? Since you guys are asking the questions in a hurry, thinking that today is the last session in Terraform, you guys are asking in a hurry. That's why I'm explaining. But all these things will be discussed in a separate session. What do you mean by these meta arguments? There are various meta arguments which you can use. We'll discuss that later. But since you guys are asking in a hurry, so I thought of explaining this. Is everyone clear? Now, how many resources has been created as per this configuration? Now, the Terraform. Total three resources. Using this information, one resource. Using this information, two resources, two EC2 instances. Now, if I go to AWS EC2 section, can I see both the same tags? Because I have used the tags here. I have used the tags like this. With this tag, there are two servers. Using T2.micro, with this AMI, it has created two. And using this instance type, using this AMI, one server is created. T2.medium. Now, if I say Terraform destroy, let's see what is going to happen. The last condition, what is going to happen? Now, if you say last condition, if I say destroy, the last condition, this one, if I say destroy, it is going to destroy the resources. It is going to destroy the resources, whatever has been created. Let's say Terraform destroy, all these things are getting created. All these things are getting created. Arvind is asking, sir, is there any command to apply or destroy respective resource via Terraform command without deleting a resource block in a Terraform file? You can give the resource name. You can give the resource name, what resource needs to be deleted. What resource needs to be deleted? You can give the resource name. Terraform destroy. There is an option. You can give the resource name. What resource name? That local name in the Terraform. You can give that, but it will be deleted. But it is going to be there in the Terraform configuration. Later, if you execute Terraform apply, what will happen? You are going to delete that resource without deleting the configuration from Terraform file. But if I again execute, if you guys again execute Terraform apply and think what will happen, is it going to create again? Again it will be created. Guys, think logically. Think whether that will be a correct use case or not. Don't ask like a silly kids kind of a questions. Think logically. Are you going to do that? You are going to destroy specific resource, but are you going to leave that resource information in the configuration? If you leave that resource information in the configuration, again you may try to change something other resource, but is it going to create this resource also if you leave that configuration in the Terraform file? Yes. So let's understand the resource behavior. Leave about these tags count, we'll come to know that, because there are a lot of things you need to understand. Loops is there, variables is there, loops, for loop is there, maps, you can use variables with maps, list, you can pass different, you can iterate in the Terraform blocks also. We'll come to know that point. First, don't jump here and there, understand the resource behavior. I'm teaching just resource behavior. Here you can give using, there is a concept called loops, there is a concept called variables, there is a concept called maps. Using those loops, maps, variables, you can give different data also. That will come to know later, not now. First understand the resource behavior. Is everyone clear what is happening in the resources in the Terraform configurations? Now, one important point to be remember here, one important point to be remember here, we are going to maintain the Terraform configurations in the SCM tool. Is this correct? Is it a correct? Is it a best security practice? It is not a correct. It is not a best security practice, because this is security violation in the SCM tools. In the SCM tools, you should not maintain. You should not maintain the confidential data in the SCM tools. So this is not the correct way to maintain in the Terraform code. So do you have any other option where I can authenticate with AWS without having those details in the provider block? Yes. Understand this concept. Understand this concept. Environment variables. What do you mean by environment variables? You can pass those details using environment variables. You can pass those details using environment variables. Let me remove from here. Let me remove from here. Let me remove, or let me comment for now. Let me comment, or you can remove. Let me remove this from here. But without passing some of the way, does Terraform will work with AWS? Let's say, again, I'm saying Terraform plan or Terraform apply, whatever it is it going to work with AWS without passing those details some or the other way? It will not work. It will not work. Now it is saying there is no credentials like this. Is there any other way we can pass? Consider about this one, environment variables. What do you mean by these environment variables? What do you mean by these environment variables? you can set something like this. Suppose you guys are using Linux, you guys are using Linux or Mac, you guys are using Linux or Mac, you can set environment variables like this, environment variables like this. Or if you guys are using Windows, in Windows there is a different way to set environment variables. In Windows there is a different way to set the environment variables. There is something called set-x something. Windows CMD. So if you guys are using Windows, there is a different way. There is a different way to set the environment variables. If you guys are using Windows, you can set something like this. Set. There is something called set, that environment variable name and value. Environment variable name and value. Set environment variable name and value. Like this you can set. There is a different way to set the environment variables in Windows. Linux and Mac, you can use export. Linux and Mac, you can use export. Linux and Mac, you can use export. To set environment variable for the current CMD session, you can use this set command. If you guys are using Windows systems, you can say something like this: set this, so set 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 the environment variable name. What they are saying, something like this: AWS access key ID equals to your value. If you guys are using Windows, laptops or desktops, in your Windows command prompt, you can set something like this: your access key and secret key. I kept that access key and secret key for my reference somewhere. I have downloaded. For future purpose, I have downloaded. Let me open that file. Let me open that file. Let's keep this file safely with you. So this is my access key. This is my access key. If I am using Windows, I can set something like this in the environment variable in the current session, and a secret key. This is the secret key. I can set like this. If you guys are using Windows, in Windows, you open command prompt. In Windows command prompt, in Windows command prompt, you can set like this. Before you run Terraform, before you run Terraform plan, Terraform apply, or Terraform destroy, before you run all these things, before you do Terraform init also, Terraform init also, you can set something like this. You can set something like this. If you guys are using Mac or Linux, if you guys are using Mac or Linux, you can say something like this. You can say something like this. Mac or Linux, you can say something like this: your access key, your secret key, your access key, and your secret key, your access key, and your secret key. So I am explaining still provider configuration only. I'm still explaining provider configuration only. So I can run something like this that works only in the current terminal, guys, because you are setting only in the current terminal. So I can say like this: export, because I'm using Mac, I'm saying export this like this. I don't have that information in the Terraform provider configuration, but I have set in the environment variable for the current session. Now, if I say Terraform plan, is it using that credentials? Is it using that access key and secret key? You set using this environment variable now. When I say Terraform plan, it is showing okay. 3 to add. Terraform apply, it is going to create. If I say Terraform destroy, it is going to destroy. Can we set like this also? The environment variables approach, instead of checking in those access keys and secret keys, can we use like this? And again, if you guys are using pipelines, if you guys are using CI/CD pipelines, if you guys are using CI/CD pipelines, can you do something like this also in your pipeline? Can you do something like this also? But in your pipeline also, You are executing this Terraform plan, Terraform apply via pipeline. In your pipeline, can you use these commands to set the environment variables and run Terraform commands later? Yes. But in our pipeline also, instead of reading here, instead of hard coding here, can we use this as a secret text or secret variables in Jenkins or any other CI tool? Can you refer those from Jenkins secrets here? If you know Jenkins concept. If you know Jenkins concept, in your pipeline, can you read the secret text from Jenkins and set the value here? Are you guys able to understand what I am trying to say? In your pipeline also you want to run your Terraform automation. Whenever there is a change in the Terraform configurations, you want to set like this, change like this. You can set like this. Instead of checking these details into the SCM, in the Terraform, in the Jenkins pipeline or any other pipeline, you can get from that secret text and you set it as an environment variable and you can use it. So is everyone clear? Another approach, whatever I have created, if required, I can make some changes as per my requirement. I can change as per my requirements. I can change again Terraform plan. I will reduce, I will destroy as per my requirement. This is the another way. Is everyone clear? Second way. Second way of authenticating with Terraform. Second way of authenticating with AWS using this AWS provider. There is a one more way. There is a one more way. This is shared credentials. What do you mean by shared credentials? Suppose you guys are using AWS configure. You guys are using AWS configure command. So by if you guys are configured AWS CLI or AWS CLI using AWS configure, where exactly that credentials will be stored in that system in the user home directory, in this folder it is going to store, and it is going to use that shared credentials. It is going to use that shared credentials, shared configurations. So shared configurations are credential files. Shared configurations is different, credentials is different. Shared configurations in the sense when you guys executed AWS configure, when you guys executed AWS configure to set the configuration that you guys will set like this, right? AWS configure, you guys are going to set your access key and secret key. That will be captured as part of this location. It will use that one also. Let me show that approach. Guys, this environment variables is only applicable for this session. Suppose if I close this terminal, the command prompt, if I open this command prompt one more time, and if I go to that folder, where I have those Terraform configurations, if I go to the Terraform configuration folder and if I run Terraform plan or apply like this again, it will not work because the whatever environment variables you have set, that is only for that terminal, only for that session. Is it working again? If I say Terraform plan or apply, whatever I have set using export, is it working again if I close that and open again? No. Again you need to set like this. If you are using that approach. Another approach is AWS configure. So if required, you can give the profile name. You can do something like this, right? AWS configure. I hope you know this. AWS configure. If required, you can give some kind of a profile name. Suppose something like this. If you don't give this, the default profile name is default. If you don't give like this, the default profile name is default. Otherwise, you can give the profile name also. Something like this. Then If you don't give this one, the default profile name is default only. Otherwise, you can give some profile name, Terraform profile, like that. Then you can give the access key. 1 second. You can say something like this: hyphen hyphen profile, hyphen hyphen profile, hyphen hyphen profile, and profile name. I can say something like this. But if I don't give, default is the profile. Default is the profile. That can be fine. You can go with the default also. You can go with the default also. This is AWS concept. Okay, nothing to do with Terraform. Now you give your access key. 1 second. You give your access key, your secret key, your region. If you want to leave it, or you can say AP South one, like this. Output format, leave it. Now it is going to create some credentials file in that user home directory. In that user home directory, there will be a .aws folder. In the .aws folder, there is a config file. And it is going to use the profile name, and there is a credentials in this credential. This profile name, access key, and secret key. Now you can use in your provider block. In your provider block, you can specify that profile name also. Profile, that name, whatever profile you created a profile like this, right? With that access key and secret key, that profile name you can specify. If you don't use profile name, the default profile only, the default profile. Now, even though I have not set environment variables, is it using the access key and secret key, which is configured using AWS CLI, that configuration, this shared configuration file, this shared configuration file, is it using this path basically in the user home directory .aws credential file? Is it using this one? Now, if I say Terraform plan also, it is going to use this one. Is everyone clear? This option. Now, with the last two option, whatever I have explained, do I need to check in, or do I need to maintain my AWS access keys or secret keys into the SCM tools with the whatever last two options I have mentioned? No. So is everyone clear? The various ways AWS provider can authenticate with AWS. These two options, like these four. In real time, we are logging with company credentials. How can we configure? Whatever you used, right? You define via environment variables, or you define via profile, or you pass via AWS that provider block only. Guys, in real time also you are going to use access key and secret key. If you are running as a normal user, AWS concept user, you configure your access key and secret key. If you are running Terraform from your laptop, your access key and secret key. That's why I have created a user, right? So your access key and secret key you configure. Whether you configure in the parameter section, whether you set in the environment variables, or shared credentials, or shared configuration files, it's up to you. So is everyone clear how to authenticate AWS? Suppose you have not used the profile. Let's say, let me remove that credentials file. rm-rf dot AWS I am deleting. Let's say when you say Terraform AWS configure, you are not setting a profile. It is going to taken as a default. It is going to taken as a default. Now let's say you are configuring without any profile. It is going to take profile as a default. It is going to take profile as a default. Now if you see in your user home directory, there will be a config folder, default profile, and it is going to use that, it is going to maintain that in the details in the credentials file. The profile is default. Now in your Terraform configuration, you set profile as a Terraform profile. If you run Terraform plan or Terraform apply like that, again will it work without that profile in the config, AWS config? Will it work? If you run Terraform plan or Terraform apply, will it work? Because you told profile as this one, and it is saying there is a problem. So fail to get the shared config file for profile, this one, because there is no profile you configured for AWS. So in that case, can we say something like this also? Default like this? Yes. Even though you don't mention also, it will work if it is a default profile. Now it is going to use the default profile. It is going to use the default profile. Now even though you don't define this one, internally it is going to use the default profile only. If you have a default profile, it is going to use. Is everyone clear how to configure AWS provider with required region, with required credentials? That can be a profile, that can be an access key and secret key, or you can use environment variables also. Is everyone clear how to configure AWS provider if you have to work with AWS resources? I have just explained these two. To explain this AWS provider concept, I have explained these resources, only few resources. So in tomorrow's session, we'll try to understand from resources section. We'll focus more on the resources. Is everyone clear what we can do using this provider block, what you can do using Terraform block? So tomorrow onwards, we'll focus more on the resources. These are very, very important. How to use variables, how to use loops, how to use conditions, all these things we will focus from tomorrow onwards on the resource section. Any question, any confusion, whatever has been discussed so far today? We try to understand Terraform block and provider block. So if required, you can define access key and secret key, or if required, you can define a profile like this, or you can use environment variables, whatever works for you as per your use case, your requirement. So I prefer either profile or environment variable. Either profile, that can be a default profile or custom AWS profile, or environment variables. But access key and secret key defining in the provider block is not recommended. It is a security violation. You are going to maintain that in the SCM. So it is not correct. Clear, guys? Before I wrap up the session for today.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have one query.
Yes.
Sir, regarding the certification, basically, I got a coupon from the Terraform things. So, is the right time to give the certification or just wait for like some time, because they are saying it's need to be completed within 20 days. So, can you please
No.
guide
You
me?
have to wait. You have to wait till it gets complete, because you may get questions on variables, loops, and other things also. Variable block, local block, output block, modules. Those questions also comes in the certification. Better wait till that also discussed.
Okay, sir. Can I call you in the offline? I need to discuss something else also.
If you can discuss, fine. There is no offline discussion required. Anything you can discuss, that is fine. Maybe in the chat also fine. Any technical, unless until it is personal, it can be discussed anywhere.
It's sort of is something is personal, sir. Actually, if
Okay, fine.
it's
Okay.
hmm?
Okay, fine.
After
We'll
finishing
discuss.
call, after finishing this call, I'll call you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Try to practice whatever has been discussed so far. There are a lot of topics to be discussed. Don't worry about how to give additional tags, how to give unique tags, how to create different resources, like 10 resources, 20 resources. We will discuss all those things. We just started only 30% of the Terraform only discussed. Still 70% of the Terraform needs to be discussed. Most concepts to come. But without understanding all these things, if you directly go to these resources, you don't understand. These resources are created and managed using providers only. Without knowing the providers, there is no point of discussing resources. Okay, practice whatever has been discussed, and once you practice, you just execute Terraform destroy. If you want to destroy, you execute Terraform destroy, so that it will be deleted after your practice, so that you are not going to get any charges. Terraform destroy after practicing, so that it gets destroyed. Again, you can create and practice. Okay, thank you guys. I'll continue tomorrow. From here, I'll continue tomorrow.